Got it.
Welcome back to another episode of Chatting Cinema. It's been a while since we've all kind of gotten together here, but
Yeah.
I think way overdue for us to do an episode on Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes.
Collectively, we've seen it 1,000 times.
I
And it's
mean,
been
if we
great
want to
every
do the
time.
math,
Probably.
I'm at 6.
I'm at
I don't
8.
know, 8, and then what are you at, Gianni?
Four.
Yeah. So
So 18.
Yeah.
yeah. You're welcome, Feige. We're boosting those numbers for you.
18 times.
We're part of that 1 billion gross profit.
Yeah.
So best
Record
Spider-Man
breaker.
movie ever made.
Yeah. You know, that's the
I think we should throw out there just before is that we are going to talk about the plot of this movie. We're going to talk spoilers of this movie.
Yeah.
Please go see it. If you have a remote interest in it, you're going to enjoy it somewhat to as much as we have, which is an insane amount. So go see it and then watch this because we are about to talk about everything that happens in it.
Yeah, for sure. Spoiler warning. It's been out long enough by the time this episode comes out that you're probably going into this knowing that we're going to talk about spoilers. It's one of those movies that's like, how do you even do the non-spoiler review? Because everything that happens feels like, oh, we should probably keep this on the down low so people can be surprised by it. But yeah, best Spider-Man movie. I mean, that was the internal debate for me literally the first time I watched it, because I finished up, credits rolled, and I said, this is my favorite MCU movie, like automatically, bar none, because I love Spider-Man. And so that bias combined with what this movie is easily propelled it to the top for me. So my question was whether I liked it more than Spider-Verse, because I think Spider-Verse is a perfect movie. It's a perfect Spider-Man movie. And that debate is kind of still raging on in my head. I'm still 8 times later for No Way Home, and I don't even know how many times I've watched Spider-Verse. But I still don't know if I'm ready to decide yet. So we're going to say that they're both in the same tier. They're tied for now.
Yeah, I haven't been able to break that tie either, because when it comes down to it, like, I know this is my favorite live action Spider-Man movie. It's my favorite MCU movie. I'm still also having the internal debate. Is it the best superhero movie I've seen? Because it's 1,000% in the conversation. But Spider-Verse was trying to accomplish different things. So it's like, I love them both. And I think they're both perfect movies for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like hard for me to actually pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Because they do similar things, which is kind of ironic. But also, they're both such unique and at the core of it, just beautiful Spider-Man stories, like exactly what Stan Lee thought of when he created this character. And the fact that within a 3-year stretch, we've gotten both of them, like, and for so long, Spider-Man fans, we were tested. Mental Olympics were going down for us for years, literally leading up to No Way Home, too, when they pulled Tom out of the MCU for like a month, however long that was.
Yeah, that was a nightmare.
Like, the fact that we have those two movies, as well as every other Spider-Man movie we've gotten, except for Spider-Man 3, the fact that we have all of those is just like, oh my God. Because like when we were kids, we didn't have like a definitive Spider-Man trilogy that like was satisfying and like didn't kind of leave you disappointed. And then we thought we were going to get it with Andrew and it was taken away. And then we thought we were going to get it with Tom. And then it's just crazy to me that it's happened. It's out.
Yeah.
I mean, literally the night we saw it, Flynn went and saw it and then immediately met us to go see it again. And like Gianni and I beelined for the theater, not speaking to another soul. Flynn got our tickets for us and we just ran inside. And like we were sitting there like, this is real. This is happening. And I mean, here we are 16 showings later. And oh my God, this movie. Like, I could go on for hours about why it's just a great superhero story. It's a great coming of age story. Like, and this podcast has always been a defender of John Watts, but no more John Watts slander. It's gone. It's done. It's
eliminated.
Tired. We're done. Like, yes, he's not like top tier of directors, but he knows how to direct a damn good superhero movie. And that's what matters because that's what he directs.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good place to springboard. This is something that we've discussed ad nauseum off camera, but, leading up to the movie, there were so many people who were still against it, so many people who were skeptical. And I think right up until premiere day, the three of us were even kind of saying like, yo, what if it's bad? Like,
Yeah.
what if it's not good?
Yeah.
Because they have so much they're trying to do. They're bringing back these villains from Raimi, these villains from Garfield's movies. Is it going to work? And it did, like,
Yeah.
and then some. And I
Yeah.
just remember the first time that Luke and I were sitting in the theater and credits roll. Even during the movie, we look over at each other a couple times. We're like, this is happening. Like, this is
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And
And it's one.
also, in the middle of a pandemic still, and all safety concerns still at the height,
Yeah.
we went and saw this movie in a very crowded theater, and I missed that feeling so much. And that was
Yeah.
so nice. That was like half the experience for me, was being in a crowded room, cheering and all, and usually that stuff kind of bothers me, but I was
Right.
like, nah, I'm all for it. Go for it today.
Well,
Yeah.
they built in those moments for us, so that was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I think all of us, as defenders of the theater going experience, and we always wanted to kind of be like the ideal, like quiet and people being respectful and actually watching the movie. But that was, something like that is, at the end of the day, I was feeling the clapping and the screaming, like Gianni was saying. Most of the time it would probably bother us, but right there in that moment, like I'm never gonna forget those theater experiences on opening night of No Way Home. And going back to, John Watts, and like Gianni was saying, really being concerned with bringing all of these elements from different movies that are, you know, the Raimi movies and the Webb movies, despite being Spider-Man adaptations about the same central character, are very different. Like they're different tonally, and they're different in feel and in scope and all of this. And I think that what was really amazing for the entire No Way Home team was they were able to bring back everybody and make it feel consistent with the MCU and consistent with what, we've come to expect from the MCU moving up to this point. But also, like, with the Raimi characters, having them feel like those same characters, like they still feel like the environment feels lived in and real. And the way that, you have people like Molina and Defoe bringing these performances, they're going to bring it. Like they're trained actors, they're quality performers, but also recognizing what didn't work in movies in the past and updating that. Like Jamie Foxx's Electro is the only character that's really completely different. He really, feels at sometimes like, okay, this was the guy that went through this, but this feels like a different character at this point. And I think that that all was earned. And I think that was really hard to get to a place where you have to earn this, especially because of how revered the Raimi films are. And I think all of that felt earned and all of it felt natural, especially when you have like all the updates to Jamie Foxx's Electro, like really worked for the better. And I like him so much more in this movie than I do in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like he's funny, he's charismatic. Of course, he's just playing Jamie Foxx with electric powers, but it still works really well to create a cool antagonist for Tom's Peter, and then, eventually other Peters to come and take on.
Yeah. I want to put you guys on the spot here a little bit. We sort of talked about this a few days ago, but favorite scenes of the movie. It's
Oh,
tough. I
yeah.
even
So
I even have
I
a
would
few
say
that
the
are just
whole
kind of tied.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole movie, right?
The whole
I
movie.
I I would say I do have a definitive favorite scene in the movie, and it's Toby and Andrew's Peters talking to Tom's Peter after Aunt May dies. That's the one that I've thought back to the most times. And one of the things about the MCU that I think that people don't give it credit for is it can be quiet and like reverent. Like the entire first act of Endgame is kind of like reeling from what happens in the third act of Infinity War. And I think that you have filmmakers in the MCU that know how to do that and know when to take a pause. And you have the devastation of losing Aunt May when Norman kills her. And then you have like the pure exuberance of seeing Andrew and Toby again in these roles as Peter Parker. And I think that the scene on the rooftop where they're talking Tom's Peter through this as two people that have gone through this and processed these similar emotions, I thought it was so beautiful. And it really that being the first scene where they all meet each other, it really meant a lot to me. So, I keep thinking back to that moment where Toby finishes the great responsibility line for Tom. And then Andrew says Uncle Ben said it, and Toby says the day he died. Like, it is a perfect scene. So that is my favorite scene in the movie. I think that's the one that I'll revisit the most. I think it's the one that means the most to me and hit me the most. So that's the favorite scene. But we'll talk about a lot of favorite moments. But if I had to pick one, I pick that one.
I was going to say, I think something that this movie has to its advantage is that, there are a lot more moments than there are scenes.
Mhm.
And one that I really come back to, because I'm a huge Andrew Garfield fan, as you guys know, but is in the science lab at Midtown High. And when Andrew is looking over at MJ and Peter, Tom and Zendaya, and that's very obviously a callback to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and his relationship with Gwen Stacy and how he lost her. And just in what, maybe 5 seconds, you see it on Andrew's face, because it's a testament to how good of an actor he is, that he's obviously thinking about what could have been and what was. They were in high school together. They were in probably a science lab, not too dissimilar from that one. And that could have been them at a table. It could have been them. And it hurts, but it's also such a beautiful thing. And that's also called back to again when Andrew saves MJ in the third act of the film, the final fight. It's just because this movie also could have been chalked up to it was all too much fan service, know. But
I think this is the
worked.
classiest fan service we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
Like, just because, of course, on the surface level, it's fan service. But like Flynn was saying about the characters, they felt like they were just picked up out of their universe and put here, and it flowed. It wasn't just like, here's Willem Dafoe as Goblin, but he's a completely different person. Here's Alfred Molina as like, no, it was those characters. It felt like we were just watching them in their Raimi movies in the early 2000s when we were children. And now here we are, adults, all out of college, watching them again, which was insane. But I think my favorite scene, because I think I would say what Flynn said, but just to say something different, is probably Aunt May's death scene, because that conversation, I feel like it addressed so many criticisms of Tom's trilogy in just like a 3-minute stretch of Peter's never gone through anything. Peter's never lost anything. Aunt May's just eye candy. She's not a real character. Tony just flirts with her. And it was like, Marissa Tomei's performance in this movie was unreal. Like, she cemented herself as my favorite Aunt May after this. And except maybe PS4 Aunt May, because but I really think that scene just shows how much of an emotional movie this is and how much Peter really grows from this movie, because that whole conversation, like, he had been Spider-Man, so I thought it was a different take, because Toby became Spider-Man after hearing that conversation. Like, he had the powers, but he really became Spider-Man. Tom has been Spider-Man for years, and he's literally helped save the universe. So it was like nice to see a different origin where like all 3 of these movies were his origin. It wasn't just one movie. He didn't earn the title by the end. It was like, no, this was Tom literally growing up for 3, basically 4 years of his life. And that scene felt like a big culmination point where it was like, like, the shit's hitting the fan, it's getting real. And like May saying, with great power there must come great responsibility. Like, all 6 times I've seen it, I got major chills when she says it. And then just to reinforce it 2 scenes later with Toby finishing Tom saying it, like, talk about cinema, boys. Like, we are living in the timeline where this movie exists, and I'm so grateful.
And you know what I have to say too? Like, you don't see it coming, because with Andrew and Toby in their films, we know who Uncle Ben is. We know what happens to Uncle Ben. But for 3 movies now, we've sort of set up Aunt May as somebody who's kind of safe. Like, she's not going to die. And then she does. And what a flip too, to really make her sort of the Uncle Ben in this universe, and have her deliver the line. And it's just, what an incredible thing. And also, something else, this is my personal opinion, but I think it hits harder when we see Tom and Marissa Tomei have that scene, because obviously Toby had a great scene with his Uncle Ben in his universe, But when you think about Andrew, we don't think about Uncle Ben. We think about Gwen Stacy and how he lost her. So just this scene, I think, is the definitive, with great power comes great responsibility for me.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. And I think that number one, like you said about when we think about Andrew, we think about Gwen, like credit to the filmmakers for understanding that too. Like Toby talks about losing his Uncle Ben, but Andrew talks about losing Gwen. Like that is the definitive loss for that character when we think back to, that story. And I agree that I think it's the definitive scene. And I think it was so smart because when like a lot of the criticisms of the first Amazing Spider-Man movie are, okay, we're doing this after we did it with Toby, and we have to kind of, out of sheer reverence, follow it beat by beat, this moment of losing Uncle Ben and the origin and all that. But they're also afraid to even touch the great power, great responsibility quote because of how well executed it is in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. So when you have Tom's trilogy, and I mean, this is No Way Home is the 6th appearance of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and you build up to it like that, and like you said, it's unexpected, you're not seeing it coming. I think it just, like you guys were saying, it hits so much differently because it's not this thing where every time we get a Batman, it's like, okay, let's have Thomas and Martha killed in the alley. Like, let's see it. How can we do it differently? Zack Snyder does it slow-mo with the beads all falling one by one, like trying to figure out different ways to do this. But this MCU Spider-Man does it in a way that's completely different and in a way that you don't see coming. And like Luke was saying about Aunt May being like a real character, the three of us have always felt this. Like, we've always been really big fans of MCU Spider-Man. And, I just think back to scenes where, like, my favorite Aunt May scene before this movie, as far as the Tom trilogy goes, is when she's freaking out when Tom's Peter has been ducking her calls in Homecoming, and she's just losing it. And then she sees Tom's face after he says that he lost the Stark internship, and she immediately switches to protective mother mode, and she immediately turns on, because both are maternal instincts, like freaking out that he hasn't been answering, but also being that comforting presence there because she knows that he's so hurt. She can see it in his eyes. And so it's always been like a joke to me. People that are like, oh, Marissa Tomei, just because she's like younger, that she's not a good Aunt May. Because I've always thought she was a good Aunt May. But this, I think, really brought it home for a lot of people. Like, there are so many moments with her in this movie. Like, her just completely dressing down the damage control interrogator in the beginning of the movie. Like, and I think that scene's really good because she feels like there's some truth in what he's saying when he says that she's let her, the person that she's a guardian of, be in danger this whole time. She has endangered him by allowing him to go out as Spider-Man. She knows it's not her choice, but she also kind of feels there's some truth in that. So the anger feels real, like when Marissa Tomei says that she wants to see Peter right now. And all the stuff at Feast, like it, and it's all building to that moment. And I think it's so well executed in this movie. Like that's the thing when we talk about, oh, it could have been all fan service, but it's not, right? Like, the fan service is real and genuine and earned, but all the stuff that is specific to MCU Peter Parker is so perfect. They nail it so well. So
I think if we want to get into criticisms a little bit real quick, because I think it is a good point to segue there. There's one that I keep seeing on social media, and that is that, like, this Peter, Tom Holland, trying to fix all of these villains who arguably don't need fixing. And how that scene disappointed some people in Happy's apartment.
Right.
But I would go on the defensive there and say that it's perfectly in character. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but it serves those characters even more. I think also, what a smart way, because Peter Parker's villains in comics and in these films, live action, have always had a personal connection to him. So this is such a clever way, I think, to tie these characters to Tom Holland's Peter, and to have him trying to help them, like just genuinely trying to help them because he's a good guy. And also Aunt May encourages that, she's sort of his moral compass in these films. And he feels that responsibility even more when fucking Norman Osborn caps her.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And honestly, like
Remote control glider.
Yeah.
When I hear people complain about that, I just want you to rewatch Tobey Maguire saying it's what we do and just try to challenge that again.
Yeah.
Because
So good.
Spider-Man doesn't want to kill people. He doesn't want to hurt people. He doesn't want to throw people in jail. Literally in Andrew's movie, Andrew is trying to cure both of those villains.
Yeah.
And like, of course, Toby's Peter wants to help Norman. It's his best friend's dad, who's been a father figure to him and has been helping him pay for their extremely fancy loft apartment. But like the idea that Peter all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Tom's Peter just wants to help people. Like, and it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, but Peter Parker is all about helping people. And like almost every iteration of him, he doesn't want to beat the shit out of his villains. He's always trying to figure out how to cure them, help them, save them. He doesn't want them to live this life, no matter how many times he's hurt, they have hurt him or people he loves. And like literally the line where like in the beginning of the movie when they're on the bridge fight and Alfred Molina says like, I should have like offed your girlfriend or whatever. And you see the anger in Tom's Peter. I feel like that was a nice precursor to like, Tom has to deal with this now. Because like before, he didn't really deal with things like that because nobody knew he was Spider-Man. But all of these villains popping up, knowing him, knowing his family, his secrets, like all this stuff, even if they're different Peters, like literally Norman Spaceman, he's like, MJ, fascinating. Like, you know, and I just think that like that criticism doesn't make sense to me because if you like Spider-Man, if you consider yourself a Spider-Man fan, you know he helps people. That's what he does.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the point you made, Gianni, about connecting it to Tom's Peter, because that was one concern I had moving into this movie, because we build this, Sinister Five almost, and I was kind of disappointed by, I loved the decision to bring back Defoe, Molina, and Fox. But when I saw, we're bringing back Risa Fons as the Lizard and Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, I was like, all right, number one, is this movie going to be overstuffed? And number two, are we going to have our first live action Sinister Six and not have any of Tom Peter's villains? Because I don't know how you can knock Peter's villains in the MCU Spider-Man films. Like, have as many problems with them as you want, but Michael Keaton's Vulture and Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio are top tier Spider-Man antagonists. So I was really concerned about that because I was like, here we're going to have, whether Toby and Andrew are in the movie or not, we're going to have Tom's Peter Parker facing off against these villains, none of which he has a personal connection to. And that, like you said, dead on, that apartment scene was perfect. The perfect way to do that and connect them to, I mean, think about the fact that we get that amazing Goblin fight in the condo before we have the death of Aunt May. And right before those moments, you have Peter with like the biggest smile working with Norman on the chip for Otto. Like it hits so hard because you see like what this could be if they were cured and they didn't have these, tragedies happen to them. And then it flips and you have, the incredible moment. This film is just chock full of like great Spider-Man moments, but Tom's spider sense going off and looking through the apartment and realizing that it's the Goblin, taking control of Norman. Like that's a heartbreaker because again, credit to everybody involved with the making of this film. But every time I watch it, I'm like, how can I feel sympathy for Norman Osborn after the first time I've watched this, knowing what he does to Aunt May and knowing what the second half of this film looks like? And every time I see him is that confused man in the feast center that Aunt May is trying to help. It's like reinforcing that idea of Peter Parker. This is why we do this. This is why we want to help these people, because that's not, the Goblin isn't all that he is. And I think it's amazing the way that they were able to do all of this in a way that doesn't feel like this movie's biting off more than it can chew.
Willem Dafoe's best performance as Norman and the Goblin, right? Hands
Agreed.
down. I mean, it's
Insanity.
no question.
I mean, when Tom is just punching him in the face in the apartment building and he's just laughing hysterically. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Goblin mask from the Raimi movies. I think that Goblin suit is like one of the best live action comic suits we've ever gotten. But the fact that he shatters it in the first act and we get to see his freaky little face the whole movie was such a treat, because like Willem Dafoe is insane.
Yeah.
And like all of the moments that we got with the Goblin, like of course his voice acting work was phenomenal in the Raimi movies and you got that feel, but like Norman's on sabbatical, honey, and you see the look on his face when he says it, or like any of the stuff in the last fight on the Captain America shield, like, oh my god, it's so
Norman's face when he tells Peter that he's the one who killed her, like he was the reason that Aunt May was there, and that ghoulish smile. Shout out to Mr. Sunday Movies and Nick Mason, Caravan of Garbage, because when they were talking about the Raimi movies, they were like, well, we thought Willem Dafoe got cast because he had a motorized goblin face and he didn't need the mask. And it's like, it's so true. Like he looks more like the Green Goblin without the mask than with the mask.
Yep.
Like again, like Luke said, I like the helmet design. It's cool. I would like to have one. They're too expensive on Etsy, but
one day.
I like that. I like that design, like in a vacuum, but seeing the way that Defoe can bring the Goblin to life without the helmet. Like, I'm so glad that they made that decision to present him as that with the hoodie too, like ripped. Like, it's
really nice,
it's such a perfect updated design. All of the characters that got updated designs. I mean, it's only him and Jamie Foxx's Elektra, right? Like, Ock looks the same. Lizard has a bit of a difference, and Sandman is all sand because I guess Thomas Hayden Church couldn't make it to set, which is fine. But man, Norman's redesign and Max's redesign look really good. Like, I love the arc reactor Electro look, and I think he's so fun in that fight. Like, he is all over the place because he can kind of teleport around.
Yep.
Another underrated moment when all of Andrew's Spider-Man interacting with Max's Electro was perfection. Like, it was so good.
Hey Max, I missed you, man. So good.
You ain't even the shit no more. Like, so much fun. And going back, I did want to say something about Gianni when you're talking about Andrew Garfield and how when he's talking about Gwen and stuff. Tom is my favorite Spider-Man, but I think it's undebatable that Andrew Garfield is the best actor that's played Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And man, you really feel it in moments in this movie. Like the rooftop moment is like, man, this guy is the best actor here. And he's with all like great actors. Like Tobey Maguire's a great actor, Tom Holland's a great actor, Zendaya is incredible, and Jacob as Ned is fantastic too. And it's his best performance, I think, as well, as Ned in this movie. But man, Andrew's just like, he is on another level than a lot of these actors. And it's not a discredit to him, to anybody else. It's just this guy is a special talent. So, and I feel that some ways with Defoe and Molina too, when they're like, there's a certain gravitas to them.
Yeah.
And I think it's both as a credit to their characters coming before and being established for so long, and also the fact they're just incredible performers. So,
and something I want to touch on with Andrew Garfield, which speaks just to the character and the grace of him as an actor and as a person, is that of the three actors to embody Peter Parker and Spider-Man, he's the one who has every justifiable right to be disenfranchised with the franchise and not want to come back after his experience with Sony and with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in particular.
Yeah.
But, you know, when he got the call, he was like, I'm in, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And he showed up, like, and
he nailed it.
With a half hour of screen time, he has some of the best moments in the movie.
In that same vein, we know Tobey Maguire has not had a fun time with paparazzi from the day he was cast as Spider-Man.
There are cars there.
All I can think of, is the clip where he laughs at the guy. But really, I think at the end of the day, even if this isn't your favorite Spider-Man movie, you have to take a step back and look at how we got here. Because we had 3 Tobey movies that were received. Like, Spider-Man 2 is considered one of the best superhero movies of all time, let alone just a phenomenal movie. And then you have 3, which kind of tanked and killed the momentum, and 4 gets canceled. Then you have Andrews, and everyone seemed to really like Amazing Spider-Man. And again, Andrews' acting really shows in those movies. Even in 2, he still shines, and so does Emma Stone. But then 2 doesn't really do so well because a couple forced weird plot lines, and 3 gets canceled. Then we get Tom in the MCU, and we're like, wait, but how does that work? And then it's the to and fro, and it's just like, okay, at the end of the day, they made this happen. They pulled this off. Everybody, like the actors, got so much closure from it. Hearing Andrew talk about it now, one, that man deserves an Oscar for his press tour during Tick Tick Boom, because he didn't break once. He didn't even allow it. He was like, nope, stomping it out every time. And like even Tom Holland deserves credit, because Tom, we love you, but you spoil things, and he somehow managed to not. But I think at the end of the day, this is such a triumph for superhero movies, because this couldn't have happened 20 years ago, because there was no connection to previous actors like this.
Right.
Like this movie happened as a result of how pop culture has changed due to superhero movies. We saw 3 Spider-Men from 3 different eras. One when we were like 5 years old and Blockbuster was still open. One when we were teenagers and we were just starting to go to the movies like on our own. And then one from our college and adult years. All 3 of them on screen together. And like the way the 3 Peters molded together, where they felt like the same person, but at the same time, such individual, unique people. And like they have shared experiences, they have different experiences, they relate to each other. And Andrew's ad-libbed line of "I love you guys," and he just said, "I was just loving them in that moment and I needed to say it." This is a beautiful movie. I cannot believe it happened. And I think the 3 of us are going to gush about it for maybe another 50, 60 years. So get ready.
Yeah. There were there were a number of moments when I was first watching No Way Home where I just said to myself, I'm never going to get over this for as long as I live. Like, this means so much to me. And, you know, you think of Sony and you think of, like the both of you brought up, like all of the times where they kind of bungled Spider-Man and messed it up, and that got us here. And somehow they packaged all of that together into something so beautiful where, like, in a way, it almost feels worth it, right? Like all the missteps culminating in this, the original true believer, Avi Arad, messing things up, or like Amy Pascal throwing sandwiches at Kevin Feige. Like somehow that all culminated in this. And it's beautiful. And I think that it it's a film that understands Spider-Man really well, understands the films that came before it really well. It has to deal with, you know, decades of comic history, over a decade of filmmaking, all of the MCU that came before it, and 2 separate Spider-Man franchises, and somehow comes out in a way that satisfied everyone. Like, I thought for sure, no matter how good I thought it was, that it wasn't going to be able to live up to the gargantuan hype that it built for it. I mean, you know, people are going to forget in the coming years, something relating to Spider-Man or these films was trending every single day on Twitter in the lead up for months in the lead up to this movie. Every single day, Toby was trending, or Andrew Garfield was trending, or Raimi was trending, Amazing Spider-Man. Like, there was always something trending and like contending with leaks and spoilers and all this. And somehow it all came together in like the most satisfying package. So I'll forever be grateful. Like, I think that Amy Pascal being able to pull this off with Kevin Feige is like really special. And I just can't believe we got this movie after that dark period of, well, Tom's not going to be in the MCU anymore. And then we got this. Like, no matter what happens next, like nothing can take this particular film away from people, and it bringing people together. And like, you know, a lot of people that didn't even like the MCU Spider-Man movie were like, all right, I got to admit this one's pretty good. Like, so it was just nice to see some positivity around that character, a character that's so positive, that has such a negative online fan base. It felt like, you know, I'm sure that we're going to get back to the negativity soon enough.
Oh yeah.
But for a while, it was just all people talking about how much they liked that movie. And so that was just a really nice period and era. And I'm going to miss it in like the years to follow. I'm going to remember it as fondly as like the lead up to Infinity War. So
and
really
also,
grateful.
another thing to kind of like springboard off what you were saying, Flynn, a lot of people who weren't previously had a shred of interest in the MCU. I had so many people reaching out to me being like, which one should I watch before I see this? Like what do I need to know? And like I brought multiple friends who had just, I was like, listen, time's not going to allow you to watch all the things you need to, but at least watch Tom's first two movies.
Yeah.
And I brought multiple people who had just seen Homecoming and Far From Home. And then a week and a half later, they've seen all of Andrew's, all of Toby's Spider-Verse. And they're like, hey, is this Venom movie worth it? I'm like, if you're hungry, like if you really want something,
you're into that.
But it's just so cool to see because Spider-Man and Batman and then Superman are probably the three most recognizable superheroes and will always be. And the fact that Spider-Man just came back at this strong of a push of like, yo, like I remember my power, I remember my pull.
Yeah.
And like during a pandemic, it nearly shattered records. Imagine if this wasn't a pandemic, it would have broken every record. Like it made over $1 billion, right? Like
it's way past $1 billion at this point, I think.
And like its opening weekend was the record, right? Didn't it beat Endgame out, or was it close?
It was the second biggest opening weekend.
That's right.
Yeah.
But still, you have to remember Endgame came out May of 2019. May, arguably the best month for movies to come out. And this was December 2021 during a surge of a new COVID variant, a sentence we would have not understood when Endgame came out. What the hell does that mean? But like everything that this movie went through, everything that we had to go through to get here, it almost feels like it's fitting that it's the Spider-Man is the character we're talking about because Spider-Man goes through so much. And like the reason why everybody loves him, under that mask could be you. That's the whole point. And like this movie encapsulates so many of the most core important themes of Spider-Man. And I'm just so happy that it exists. And like the fact that, because the hype was so scary at the same time, the whole time we were like, how can it be that good? Like, how can it live up to this? Like we literally did a podcast about it where like Jamie Foxx got announced and we were like, what does it mean? Like, is he Jamie Foxx from Amazing Spider-Man 2? Is he Jamie Foxx like just playing Electro in this universe? We were so confused. Rita's news dropped and we were even more confused because that's a different universe. And then they were like, hey, a little Doctor Strange in this movie, which we haven't even mentioned yet. And it's like, oh my God, like, everything just works so well together. And freaking Daredevil just peeking his head and be like, I'm around.
He's a really good lawyer. He's really good.
I love the fact like that Aunt May goes, thank you, Matt. Like they're friends. They absolutely were friends. And like Aunt May just knew Daredevil, but didn't even know that he was a superhero. So I just love that. But yeah, I mean, this movie just feels like such a treat, such a reward after everything that's been going on in the world the last couple of years. And it's like Spider-Man is just always there for you. And all of us have pre-ordered the 4K Steelbook. Like when this movie comes out physically, it's just going to be on loop in our houses. So if you want to watch Spider-Man, let us know.
Come over.
I think we should probably wrap up pretty soon, but there's one thing that we have not discussed that I think would be criminal if we didn't before we ended our episode on this movie. And that is the final scene. You know,
perfect ending place.
Talk about like final swings in Spider-Man movies, which have become a staple in Spider-Man films. They all end on a high note, but this one, and I think it's the reason it's my favorite, is that it just kind of ends on a very quiet sense of melancholy almost for this Peter Parker, because he's been through so much. He had the thrills of this film. He had the downs, he had the ups, and now he's just he is alone and more alone than he's ever been, especially for this Peter Parker in the MCU. He literally has nothing, like nothing and no one. You know, Peter Parker effectively died in this movie. And it's just kind of a really inspiring thing, I think, just that he's still going out there and he's going to be Spider-Man. Just what an expectation subversion too. And I don't know, it's perfect. It's my favorite Spidey swing. It's my favorite final swing.
Yeah, I completely agree because, you know, you have really the goodbye with Zendaya's MJ and Jacob's Ned, which, you know, before I get into the final swing, just real quick, want to shower some praise onto them because we all know Zendaya is a great actress, Emmy winner Zendaya, She's phenomenal, but this is really the time that she actually gets to sink her teeth into the MJ role, and she shows, why she's such a great actress. I mean, she's fantastic in the movie. And then Jacob as Ned, with Ned Leeds in the films being like a really different character. Like I remember when they announced it was like, what are we doing here? You're kind of like mixing Miles Morales' best friend, but like by far to me, best Peter Parker best friend. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of either Harry Osborn in either franchise before this, but I really realized how much I loved Jacob's Ned in Endgame when they have their moment as the film is kind of wrapping up to Tony Stark's monologue. And they just do their handshake and there's like tears in both their eyes. Like that was a moment for me where I was like, oh man, I really like this guy. And that goodbye at the end of the movie is painful. Like when Ned makes Peter promise that he's going to go out and find them, like it's like he can't even find the words. So, shout out to both of them. There's so much to talk about in this movie that it feels like you're always missing something, but for sure want to sing their praises a bit. But like you were saying, Gianni, to end on that swing, when you have Peter lose everything, and you're kind of rapid fire, like you have the moment at the gravestone with Aunt May and he tells Happy, Spider-Man's going to keep it going. Like he's going to keep helping people like she did. And then you have the quietly devastating coffee shop scene where Peter kind of comes to the realization, at least to him, and as far as he thinks, that MJ and Ned are better off without him, and doesn't go through his plan and just kind of lets them be and lets them get ready to go off to MIT. And then you have that swing and it's him just persisting and continuing to rise, even though he's dealt with all this. He's still going out to help people and he still wants to be Spider-Man. And he's rocking the coldest Spider-Man suit I've ever seen. It's so good. Wear the t-shirts with that Spidey logo, please. I want it so bad, but it's a gorgeous suit. The snow falling, the giant Christmas tree in the background. It's like you were saying, just like a perfect final swing and a perfect note to end the movie on. Like, I think that if it ended at the coffee shop scene, it might be a bit of a downer. Like, you don't want to leave like too sad, right? So that final swing is like he's still here. Like lots of inspo from Spidey PS4 we're seeing with the, the police scanner and the apartment and everything, which is a very good place to take inspiration from. And yeah, it's the perfect ending. It's a perfect way to end it. So fantastic final swing, the best.
And I think my favorite part about the final swing, aside from the most beautiful comic book suit we've ever seen ever, HD stills immediately, please. Need a poster, Funko Pop, all of it.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite part about it, and it's like Gianni was the first to say this while we were watching it, but like Giacchino's score is so unreal. And that final music cue, I heard it in a TikTok today because TikTok is somehow just playing this whole movie now. But like hearing that music, I didn't care what stupid dance people were doing on TikTok. Good for you, dancers. But like just hearing that note, it brought me back to seeing it the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth, whatever. And like it is such a great Spider-Man score. And I think one thing that can be said about all the movies is we've never had a bad Spider-Man score. They're all good music. So like the fact that Giacchino was just like, hey, I'm gonna make the best score you've ever heard. Like melting all of these beautiful themes in, like weaving them into a new score. And then that final one, I really hope is like the new MCU Spider-Man theme. Just like so good. And that final swing, like I'll literally watch the whole movie just to have the build up to the final swing. I'll watch the final swing a million times on YouTube, but like just hearing it, seeing it, and like having the movie build to that quiet, somber moment for Peter to be like, this is where he's at now. And like all of our hearts were ripped out when he was saying goodbye to Zendaya and Jacob. But like at the same time, Peter needed to go through all this. Peter needs to be where he's at. And it's like this kind of soft reset where like all of everything that happened matters, but it only matters to Peter. And that's why it's kind of special. And this movie is very special.
Yeah. This is a great movie. We're probably going to talk about it here,
Yeah.
there, everywhere.
Scene
after this.
breakdowns.
Yeah.
The next episode that we're about to record may or may not involve this movie as well. So we'll see. You'll find out.
But on that note, we'll catch you in the next one.